Interviewing Leonard Peter Waldron, otherwise known as Scotty Waldron, with the numbers VX113955 or V54650 on the 29th of February 2008. Thank you, Scotty, for agreeing to do this interview for the 39th Battalion. If we can start, can you tell us a little bit how you became involved in the 39th Battalion?
Yes, well, I was in the 5th Battalion VSR at the time.
That's Victorian Scottish Regiment.
Yeah, Victorian Scottish Regiment. Had been for about 2 years when they sent us word that there was to be a meeting. I really can't remember whether it was at Hawthorn or Richmond, but I've got a feeling it was at Hawthorn, at the drill hall. And so I decided that we'd go. They didn't tell us anymore. There was a meeting. And when we got there, and I was, as I told you, I was going to a ball that night with one of our VSR friends. Ernie Wilson was in my company at the 5th Battalion. And we were going to a ball, and we had on our dicky suit and black tie. There was quite a crowd there at this hall, and they told us that they were calling for volunteers to do garrison duty somewhere overseas. So there was a third bloke, Bob, I can't think of his name, but and he volunteered too. There was 3 of us going. And so when it was finished, he said, right, we'll call for volunteers. Well, I said, well, I'll go. And Ernie said, well, I'll go. We put our hands up and they called us straight away. They said, here's a couple of blokes going out somewhere. We'll have to get rid of you first. So our names went down before everybody else's. It wasn't until maybe 4 weeks or 5 or 6, I'm not sure, I can't remember. And as it happened, I was down at Lorne with my girlfriend and her mother for a week's holiday at Cumberland, believe it or not, like in those days, because that was about the only place you could go, I think, by the way, at Lorne. And then my mother rang me from Melbourne, or sent a message down that there was a letter here from the 5th Battalion, and she wondered if it was urgent, and she opened it and she said, yes, you've been picked to go, you're going, you know, and you've got to report pronto, quickly. And from what I remember, we had to come straight away, although we're only there for the week, you know. So that's how I got into the...
Were you excited at that stage or nervous?
How could I remember? I mean, not nervous or excited, just...
It's one of those things you had to do.
Yeah, it happened. I mean, I was pleased.
Yes.
Oh, yes, I would have thought I was pleased, you know. I don't think it made any great impression on my girlfriend or her mother, or my father was pleased, by the way, because he was in Gallipoli and on Gallipoli, and he was quite pleased about it, in one way, I suppose, you know.
How old would you have been at that time?
I think I was 19, going 20. I've got a feeling it was sometime in October or September. I'd say more September, and my birthday's the 22nd, so I reckon I'd have been about 19 then.
Young, isn't it? Really?
Well, it wasn't. I don't think it was young in those days, because you know, all my friends were working, and you know, they were sort of a different sort of, as I said.
You were working then too?
I was working, oh yes. Oh no, I'd been working for ages. since I was well, nearly 14, and I was doing, you know, I had quite a good job at Manton's. I left, that was a shop in Burke Street that opened, not in opposition to Myers and Foy and Gibson's, but another one. And I was in the boys department, and I was second in charge. There was about 6 or 7 in the department, you know. So, and I was going all right then.
So you got your letter and you had to go and report, and then what happened?
I think we had to. I can't remember this. I think maybe I can't remember how we got to Darley.
Were you still wearing your Scottish Regiment uniform, or did they give you another uniform?
We didn't. I don't think we went up there in our uniform. I don't think we went in our uniform. I had my sister's, my wife's sister was married to. She's older, and she was married to a chap who came back from Egypt wounded, right? And he gave me an Argyll and Sutherland Glengarry.
Oh.
He gave me an Argyll and Sutherland Glengarry. He came back wounded.
Yes.
When he knew I was in the Scottish, you know, regiment. And he also gave me a hat. I'll show you a cap.
Yeah.
A cap,
yeah.
You know. Went up to Darley. I think we must have had some sort of, can't remember where we got outfitted even, really. But I wore the Glengarry, not my Scottish Glengarry, but the Argyll and Sutherland one that he brought back from the war, from there. You get what I mean? And none of the officers or anything ever pulled me up for wearing it. I think we had 40 or 50 from the 39th, from the 5th Battalion.
Yes.
Whether they all came out of that one, but I know they didn't all come out of that one night, because Ken Phelan was in the 5th Battalion, but he didn't join up that night. He was later, sometime later.
Yes.
But that's how, you know, they called me Scotty, and that's how it happened.
And that name has stuck.
Well, I wore that Glengarry all up in Darley on the Aquitania, and even at times when I was in Moresby, you know. And then, I was never pulled up about it, you know.
Did it survive and you brought it back to Australia after?
No.
Didn't make the grade.
No. We were silly enough not to keep those sort of things. The same as we were, you know, weren't experienced enough to jot down what was happening. There weren't many cameras around in those days. I mean, I've just hunted. I can tell you, I'll show you. I've hunted for a couple of photos of mine.
Yes.
And it was only the last book that I found out in Thelma's sewing room that was right down the bottom, that there was some photos that I'm involved in.
Yes.
I don't think our family had even a box camera. I'm pretty sure we couldn't have, because there's not many photos of us around, you know, my family.
You mentioned your trip on the Aquitania. What can you remember about that?
The main thing I can remember on the Aquitania was Crown and Anchor. I was a bit of a punter, and there was lots of gambling games going on. You know, I can't even remember the bunks or where we were sleeping. I can't. I can remember up on the decks. I can remember the fights. We used to have fights on there, odd fights,
like boxing or something.
Boxing on there. The battalion was formed, and I was in headquarter company, and I really can't remember whether I was put into the quartermaster's assistant or what. I just can't remember. I don't know how it occurred. All I can remember, when we got to Moresby and we marched, I was headquarter company, and I must have been either the storeman then or the acting quartermaster. I'm not sure. But I can remember that it fell to me to feed the blokes.
How many would you have had to feed?
Well, the company.
The whole company?
Yeah, headquarter company.
Yes.
Yeah, and organise, the first thing we had to organise was a cup of tea. And all the rations were in the boat. And they had to come out before us, or at the same time. Otherwise, there'd be nothing to eat up there.
Yes.
And when I got to the tea part, there was no milk. And we all had to have black tea, and I've never had white tea since.
There'd be a fair bit of grumbling about that, wouldn't there?
I can't remember.
No, well, it couldn't have been too bad.
I can't remember. I mean, I know I took the black tea the same as everybody else did.
Yes.
But I've never drunk white tea since. I can remember sort of off the road, we were on a bit of a hill by the drome, and I think we were there probably for 2 or 3 days or nights there.
This is 7 Mile Drome.
At the 7 Mile Drome, yeah. And before we moved into the area that we were allotted to.
Yes.
And as I said, I was with headquarter company, so we were near battalion headquarters. I've got a feeling I was made a sergeant, and then after that a staff sergeant, which is a quartermaster's job.
Yes.
And but I just can't remember how it happened or anything like that.
Well, you signed up with Ernie Wilson. Were you still able to keep in touch with him, or had your paths separated?
Oh no, Ernie came. We went together. We probably, I don't know how we got together, but and how Ernie got into transport. He might be able to tell you how he got into transport.
Mm.
It's a possibility that I got into the quartermaster's job because this way, that when I was in the 5th Battalion and we went on bivouacs, I was in B Company, and we used to go out on the bivouacs, and they'd send the food for lunch out in metal boxes. Somehow I was told that I'd have to take the boxes out and look after the and give them the food. So that's the only thing that I can think somehow. I mean, see, Ernie might have just told them that he was very interested in cars and that sort of thing.
There might have been no connection.
No, that's what they. I mean, that's what did happen. Chaps that that went into the SIGs were interested in electrician.
Yes.
Ken Phelan was apprentice in the electrical trade. And it didn't happen all the time like that.
But you think where possible they tried to line you up with the job?
I feel they did.
Yes.
I feel they did.
Yes.
For some, but it wouldn't happen with everybody, and you know, it wouldn't. I don't know how they did it in the end, sort of thing. Mm.
Well, you were in another country and you were having another job. How did you feel about being in a different country? Because this would be the first time out of Australia.
I don't think it ever. I don't think it ever meant anything to me.
Because the culture would be different, the climate would be different.
Well, we didn't see much of the culture.
Right.
I mean, we saw natives, black people, but I was a little bit accustomed to the black people because when I went down to Yanar in Mall, that area, there was quite a few black people down working around there.
Yes.
And it didn't strike me. And mind you, we never, while we were at the drome, I never had anything to do with the population at all.
Yes.
I never got into Moresby. Some of them, went into Moresby from the drome and where they were, but we never saw the natives hard. Once we left the drome and got to our area, which wasn't that far away, I never saw any natives then at all. And neither did majority of the we never saw how they carried on and worked, and no, never saw them. So I just probably just thought, well, we're here and this is a job we got to do, and it's what it's about.
So apart from feeding the people, what was your job at the time? Well,
my job was mainly feeding them. I had the kitchen under me.
You didn't have to do the cooking though.
No. We had a sergeant. We had a sergeant cook and a corporal cook.
All right.
And the duties out of the battalion, the kitchen got 2 and 3 doing work in the kitchen, cleaning up and everything every day.
Yes.
Morning and night. I can't remember whether I had to designate those blokes or not. I can't remember, but they were there, you know.
Yeah.
And the sergeant cook that we had was a chap by the name of Cess Lafitte, Laffy they called him, and he was a lot older than me.
Right.
But he came from the 6th Battalion, and we got people from, I knew then, you see, you didn't know a lot. You didn't know really what was going on. I thought only just until recently that every one of our blokes were volunteers.
Yes.
I can't even remember ever transferring or being asked to go from a V number to a VX number.
Mm.
And it was no deal as far as I was concerned when it happened. I mean, we changed over and that was it. But we didn't know lots of things. We didn't know for a start that there was a battalion already there and had been there for 3 months, you know.
Which battalion was that?
Well, the one that was, I've read it in a friend of mine. I mean, I haven't really delved into what's happened only in the last few years, you know.
Yeah.
They were at Milne Bay, weren't they?
Well, were they? I thought they were at Moresby. Under the brigadier there, with a brigade. I've read. Yes, another battalion, the 49th or something like that. They were there about 3 months. They were there to originally to help in the bay and all that sort of thing. But we didn't know all those sort of things that happened at all.
Well, how well equipped do you think you were for what lay ahead?
Well, first of all, we didn't know what lay ahead.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, you see. If, from what I've read in the book that a bastards of a place, right?
Yeah.
A doctor friend of mine had it, and I got it from him, you know. And I believe, from what I've read in that book, there was a battalion there under a brigadier, and I think it was Allen, that, like, they were there, never thought of sending anybody, like, they never ever thought that the Japs had come over that way. And they never thought of sending anybody up to see what it looked like up there. You know, so we didn't know what laid ahead.
Yes.
We didn't have a clue. We were there, and the other companies were spread around far down to Bootless Bay and that. And even now, I've got to, I can't remember all, the odd places and that. But I know this, that as far as training was concerned, it was pathetic. On reflection now,
Yes, yeah.
it was pathetic. I mean, even the fellas that were down all the other in the other companies, they wouldn't have been half fit to do that. To go there, and it wasn't their fault. I mean, it was the officers' fault of the battalion, but it wasn't their fault. It was they weren't. I don't think they were ever thought it was ever going to happen. They thought the Japs, if they're going to come, they'd come round to Moresby.
Can you remember when you first came under attack by the Japanese?
Yes, we were bombed, and the very first day, it was like a normal day up there, lovely and clear, blue sky, and all of a sudden, way up was these dots up there, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 of them or something like that. We could hear them, and we're, looking up, and we saw these silvery thing. Oh, they're dropping leaflets, we said. They're dropping leaflets. Oh, they put leaflets down. And then all as it got down further, bang, 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 bang. We scampered. Yeah. And to be honest, I don't think that we had. I mean, my area was here, and battalion headquarters was, company headquarters were just over there, not far away, just there. And the AK platoon was behind me there, and I don't think we even had pits dug. I don't think we had pits dug, because I don't think we had, I can't remember having shovels, except for the latrines, which the pioneers did.
Mm.
We didn't have shovels even.
That was a big surprise when it happened.
Oh, I'll tell you, we looked up there and there was all these leaflets coming down until I, whammed. And then, of course, we got bombed nearly every second day then. And we were quite close to the drone, but of course they were going for the drone and the shipping. That was the big, and of course, as the days went by and they hit the MacDewey and another couple, and we had some fatalities and injured blokes and that sort of thing, then it got a bit serious.
And you know it was for real.
Yeah, we knew it was for real.
Mm. Mm. How did you feel then?
I don't think we felt frightened or anything. I don't think we felt frightened. We thought, oh, well, it's on now.
It's a different set of rules then, though.
And even then, when that started, there was definitely no thought of anybody coming over the Owen Stanleys, like landing there. And, I mean, probably the hierarchy knew,
yes.
had a feeling and that sort of thing. Well, they knew about them coming from Rabaul, etc., but the general ranker didn't know. We didn't know.
Well, once they'd started this regular attack, were the pits dug then?
Yes. Oh, yes.
And did you have any other defences then?
No.
Just the pits to get into?
Well, because all we had, the battalion, was only the AK platoon, which what they had was no good for those bombers, and there was no, the few Kitty Hawks or Wirraways, I think we had first. I think it was Wirraways. I can't recall, but there was only maybe a half a dozen of those that flew about. I don't know that we ever saw them at all because those planes were all way up high. And, we didn't have a clue what was going on when anything was going to happen, for sure.
How did
During all this, your job as supply sergeant for food, did this stop the supply of food?
No, because the food all came in by boat, and there were still boats coming in, you know.
What sort of tucker were you getting?
Bully beef, biscuits and cheese. Generally, bully beef, biscuits and cheese. I think we must have had potatoes. I can't
that'd be tin potatoes, would
I
they?
can't remember. I just can't remember. I think the blokes that had to go to do duty at the kitchen was mainly for washing up, and stoking, getting the fire, or stoking the
boilers.
The boilers and that. I know we used to get our beer once a week, a bottle of beer.
How long did that continue for?
All the time before they moved up to go over the...
Oh.
Yeah. I know. I think that definitely they had the rations still coming in. They must have come in because we had to supply some of the boys to unload. You see.
Yes. Yeah.
What we had to eat. We never got fresh meat or anything like that. I'm sure. I can't recall. And the cooks made up whatever they did with that sort of ration.
What about clothing?
Well, we had our over there. We had our shorts and shirts, you know, but you didn't need pullovers there. I mean, it was very hot, you know.
Were you responsible for doing your own washing, or did they have some? That was your own.
No, we all did our own washing. When I become staff sergeant, I had a storeman, you know,
Yes.
to help me sort of thing. I don't know why. I had a storeman, and his name was Rob Robinson. I've got a photo of him there, and he loved his grog, and some of the blokes went into Moresby, I believe, you know, and they got liquor, hard liquor.
Yes.
And including, I'll never forget this, and somehow Robbie got hold of, I don't know if he got a bottle of it or a half a bottle, shared it with somebody else, of creme de menthe. Yeah, that's green.
Yeah.
You know, creme de menthe. And I'll never forget this night. He finished the bottle off and had the last of it up there, sucked the last little bit out of it, because I didn't drink that much at all. I mean, I liked the beer, but that was all, and I never had any of that. And people got into trouble for doing what they did, by the way. I mean, it was wrong. But Robbie, when he got a bit full, he said, he'd come into me, he slept in my tent, like we slept in the same tent there. And he didn't want to go to sleep, you know, and he wanted to keep doing things. And he'd come into me and he'd say, "What have you got to wash?" You know, and he used to get me washing and do more. I said, "Rob," I'd say, "I'll never forget this. Why don't you go to bed?" He said, "I'm in a good mood. I like to stay awake while I'm in this good mood." He was a country boy.
But the next day he'd probably crashed, did he?
Oh, no.
No, kept going?
No, he came up. Oh, no. I don't think he ever got really and truly sozzled, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he was a very, very simple and nice country boy, you know. And I'll never forget this. That's one of the things that stuck. He said, "Oh, I just want something to do," and you know, he wanted
The middle of the night.
Yeah.
Did you ever get up into any mischief?
Did I? No, I didn't get into much trouble, I don't think.
Did they have much in the way of recreation or something like that for you, or was it just work all the time?
No, we had I think we had pictures occasionally. We used to go somewhere handy for pictures. I don't think we ever had concerts or anything like that. It was when we were at Moresby, we had a good two-up school.
Oh, yes.
And I was very interested, very keen on the two-up school. And I used to, you know, bet on the two-up school. And of course, I run the bookmaker too. I was the bookmaker. I mean, I started that in Darley. No sooner. That's why I think that we got to Darley around about September, late September, because I remember running the book on the Cox Plate and the Melbourne Cup that year.
Yeah.
And I can even tell you the Cox Plate, the horses and everything.
Yeah.
And I can even tell you the odds I bet.
Successfully?
Well, successfully, because there was, I mean, I don't know whether it's interesting.
Okay, go. Yeah.
At that time, there was, because I used to bet when I was 14 and 15 years of age because my father was a gambler.
Mm.
My father came home from the war and flushed because he was away for a long time. He was a punter and a gambler. And he came home and he had, in those days, what would have been a lot of money. This is what story my mother told me. And she wanted him to buy a house straight away. But he got home and there used to be ponies in Northcote and Richmond, plus the ordinary races.
Mm.
And he'd punt on them, and he'd even send a bloke where he couldn't go and punt on the others. And Mum told me that he said that if his luck held out, he'd be able to buy 3 houses. In the end, they put a deposit on 868 Nicholson Street and took 30 years to pay for it.
Oh.
During the Depression, he used to go rabbiting, as I told you, because he worked for Patterson's, and he was put there off to 3 days a week, which was even lucky in those days. And he not only did rabbiting, but he got in touch with the shoe people down in Fitzroy that made shoes. And Patterson's used to send him to different places to measure up carpet and that sort of thing. And he got shoes and he started to sell shoes in the country and boots. But not only that, he got the leather cuttings from the shoes, and we made football stops in our back room.
Oh, yeah.
The whole family of us. I had 2 other brothers younger than me. And my wife, my mother and father, we made football stops for Fitzroy Football Club. And my youngest brother was only about 7 or 8, and Mum used to get the cut-offs, like quite big cut-offs, and the first thing she'd do on a block of wood with a tomahawk, cut them, whack them into a bit of a shape, and then we'd put them into shapes my uncle did a machine on with a timber frame and a plane blade, you know, a plane blade, and he set it in on a block. The block was on the angle, and there was a hole in the middle, and we'd put 2 nails through first, through in these bits, you see, and then with your foot you'd bring it down on the angle, turn it round, turn it round, turn it round. And that's, see that finger, I've taken the corner off.
From that?
From that. I took the corner off. Yeah. And anyhow, but he was a gambler. And I started to punt a bit when I was a kid, bob each way and all that sort of thing in Preston, you know. So when I went, and Dad used to run an SP, little SP things, you know, around the area, because it was all small, you know, because there was no money those days. So I started when I went up there. And then when I went to New Guinea, I organised 4-place horse cards. Dad used to send them up, get them away on the mail on the Thursday night, and about every 3 out of 4 we'd fluke it and get them there for Saturday morning, and I'd give them to all the boys in the battalion.
Yes.
And they'd have the 4-place horse cards too to pick from, and then I'd lay the odds up there.
So there was a bit of fun and games. It wasn't all
games. And then, as I said, you know, there was the 2-up game which I loved, and I used to, you know, I'd bet pretty heavy, and I'd have a good luck, and I'd, if I was well ahead, I'd dash back to my tent or next door where Laffy was in bed, and I'd give him £200 or something and say, or £100, don't under any circumstances give me that back tonight. I don't want it back. I'm going back, but I don't want this under any circumstances. And he used to tell me a story about this, you know, how many times I've done it and how I came back trying to get some 50, just give me 50 back again.
How were you paid when you were in the army?
Can't recall. I can just remember it was payday. We were paid by cash.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't mean we only got a certain amount. A certain amount was, I think you allotted it. You allotted it, I got a feeling.
But apart from your gambling or your fun times,
you didn't.
Was there anything to spend it on?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. But I don't think we got that much. Just the same. And if you are, I wouldn't have a clue. I got married when we came back on our leave, you know, after Buna, Gona, and of course then I allocated mine to my wife.
Yes.
Then, but we got our beer. We didn't have to pay for our beer, and we had nothing else to spend it on, except I know that we had money because we gambled. So we must have got something, you know.
Yeah. Well, how long would you have stayed around that Port Moresby area?
I think we got there. We got to Moresby. Oh, we know when we got to Moresby because we left on Boxing Day, I think. On Boxing Day, and we arrived nearly on New Year's Eve or something like that, which would take us into, say, January, and we were there, you know, the battalion and whatever was left of the battalion was there probably till August, September or something
long as
like
that.
that.
Did you stay there all that time, or did
No.
you go on?
No, I stayed. I was there till I didn't go up to Koitaki and Co. I went to Koitaki, but then I had to come back. I had a boil here, right, a big boil right there, and it was a brute of a thing. And I don't think I ever had one before, and never had one since. But I came back, and then I went on the honour force when that was when the battalion, when they came back to Koitaki from the mount, from the track.
Yes.
And Colonel Honour was given this force of about 300 or 400 to go in on a parallel with the Kokoda Track.
Yes. Yeah.
And we were away 4 weeks. We never struck anything. I know we never struck anything, but it was bloody hard. I'll never the first night out. I recall it. I just flopped down and I wanted to die. the first march, because we weren't fit anyhow. But what I'm getting at, like it was something carrying your gear, and it was the same sort of mountainous thing. And so we were there. I went on that with Colonel Honour, and I think the only other person that I can remember, I'm pretty sure, was on there was Lovett. He went as the adjutant. I think he, it seemed, and I went as the court one. Whether it was the only quartermaster or to look after the food, I'm not quite sure.
Did you volunteer for that, or were you handpicked?
I can't recall.
Well, after that time, then you came back to?
Then we came back, and fairly quickly after that, we flew to Popondata. I can recall marching from Popondata down to Gona, Buna, down that area. Yes. I recall it was flattish.
Yes.
And I recall the kunai grass that was
so high,
overpowering, over high of us. And then I remember hitting to the beach area where the track went into a sort of supposedly road, and evidently the natives, because it was muddy, terribly muddy, and they had jeeps and things, evidently, and they'd put timber, saplings, about that round they were, tied together like a platform.
Like a corduroy road.
Like a road, yeah. I can remember seeing that straight away, and I thought, good God, look at this, And we were down there till the finish. I was there till the finish, and as a quartermaster, looking after the food for headquarter company. We didn't know what was happening, we knew there was Yanks, like we struck the Yanks. The Yanks were there, and it was hectic, and the only thing that I do, the only near thing that I ever had, I was talking to George Mowat when he was hit.
Oh.
I was just talking to him, just like you and we were standing.
Yes.
And all of a sudden he went down like that. And it was it turned out, I didn't even know, and I can't remember how he was taken away. There was other people around, other soldiers around. It was down on the front somewhere in the area there.
Yes.
And I thought he was struck by a sniper. You know, he'd got a sniper, and he just went down. And I don't know that it. I thought it was, you know, crook for George because I'd known him. I mean, and he was an old First World War man, and everybody knew George Mowat.
Yes.
The same as they knew Jim Cowie. I mean, they were sort of fathers to the battalion. And you know, it was just unfortunate as it turned out, and could have been me.
Could have been you, that close.
I was just, we were talking about rations and things like that.
Yeah.
And down he went. Then the going out, I'm sure I was in the last lot that went out. I have read in that Bastard of a Place book, there was some, and I reckon that I counted 39 that went out in the last little bit. To Dobadora we went out from. Mm-hmm. And in that 39, in that last lot, there was Anderson was the in charge.
Yes.
Yeah. Keith Lovett was there. Symington was there. That's the three officers that I know. I remember for sure was there. And plus my corporal cook, who I finished up carrying his bag for him, his pack for him for the last so long, I forget how long.
What, he had been injured, was it?
No, but he wasn't fit, you know.
Right, yeah.
And he was a corporal cook, and that's all he'd done. And he couldn't take the walk, you know. He would just.
So you had to walk back from Gona back to Popham's Debtor?
No, we went back to Dobadura.
All right.
Yeah. I'm sure.
How far would that have been?
I can't recall.
Roughly.
I can't recall. I think it took us nearly all day. And from what I recall, we were the only ones that caught the plane there. There was no other. I can't remember any other people there waiting. And I feel sure that was the last. I think the colonel had gone by then. He'd probably been recalled, you know. That was when it was all finished, when Sanananda was down and Gona was gone. It was all finished.
Yes.
And there was more AIF came in to take over from us. And mind you, all these things happen, and the ordinary soldier, even as staff sergeant, we didn't know who was who and what was what and that sort of thing.
You just did as you're told and took one day at a time.
Well, that's right. You know, I'm sure that you know that'd be the case.
Did that finish your time with the 39th?
Got back somehow or other in the plane, and I just can't remember how long it took us to get organised, but then the next thing we were on the boat.
Oh, yes.
Going back home.
Can you remember an excitement or a relief or what?
We were thrilled. We must have been thrilled.
Yes.
You've got to remember, there's a lot happened to me since.
Yes, yes.
There's been a lot. I've had a busy life. I mean, I had 7 shops, and I had a factory, and I had, 150, 200 people working for me. I was filled. I had 5 children. I've been, since then, that's why in the early days I was tied up and really never got involved.
Yeah. With the association.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was making a business, and
Getting on with life.
And you know, and as I said, I had 4 children, not in a hurry, but you know, every 18 months or 2 years sort of thing. I was probably ambitious, and well, I must have been, because I started my first shop in High Street, Northcote, and I took the building. It was on the wrong side of the road in High Street. I don't know whether you know High Street, Northcote at all. On the wrong side of the road, and I started a children's wear shop because I was in boys' wear at Mountains.
Yes.
And I started a children's wear shop that cost me £2 a week. The building did, with an upstairs thing. I let the other part of the shop for 30 shillings a week. I paid 10 shillings a week rent.
Well, you did all right with that one.
And when I went out of business, I was paying at the shopping centres, well, Northlands, I was paying something like, miles too much, over 80,000 at Northlands, over 80,000 a year, and Knox about the same, and Eastland about the same, all those places. So I was, lots happened to me. Plus also, as I said, my wife and I, we had at least 3 trips overseas of sick. Like, I wouldn't take any holidays for quite a while. And when we went away, we went for 3 months sort of thing.
Yes, yeah.
And so a lot's happened, you know.
Well, all right, they're hard times to remember, but what do you think, can you think of one thing that's really important to remember about your time in New Guinea? Is there any one thing that stands out more than another?
Well, the George Mowat thing does.
Yes.
I mean, I've never forgotten it. Another thing stands out is, it must have been fairly early when I was, and I don't know when it was, I came across, and I wasn't on my own, I came across a possible trench, quite a big trench that was filled with water, and there was a Jap dead in it on the top, bloated, you know.
Yeah.
I've never got that out of my mind, you know. You know, I don't know whether...
Well, what do you think is important for future generations to know? What would you like to say to future generations about your time, or about any aspect of this?
Well, you know, in hindsight, you think you could have done things a lot better, and it could have been, even back in those days, if we'd have known more than we knew, things might have been better. But I think that it's a hard question, that, because, you know, our idea of the kids today is they've got everything too soft. And so, you know, I wouldn't want to I don't want to pass judgment on them. You get what I mean?
You don't know what's going... If they were faced in the same situation, you don't know how they'd come up.
No, you don't. I mean, they might find it better. You know, they might be with their better education and, well, supposedly better education, and the fact that they know what goes on in the world more. You know,
a whole different ball game.
It's a different ball game. I mean, it's different altogether. I mean, it stands out to me that we must have been very, very unexperienced in you know, what we know of the world today. What we know of the world today.